Every organization has talent, systems, and culture. And the better your system, the better your culture, the better talent you attract, the better your talent will perform, and the better the talent you'll retain.
The relatability. And it's like, yeah, I had to slow down to be with people around me. And then what I learned is, oh, now we can go fast. Instead of thinking, I'm going to go so fast that they want to keep up with me, that doesn't work.
Your life's impacted by three things: the people you meet, the books you read, and the trauma in your life. The first two you can control. The third, it's hard to control. My trauma for me was getting cut by the NBA. And that, I hit rock bottom, and then I rebounded. That's why the title of the book, You Rebound.
Welcome to the Tyler Dickerhoof Show with me, your host, Tyler Dickerhoof. On today's episode, I am joined by Matt Doherty. You may remember Matt as the head coach of Notre Dame basketball, North Carolina basketball, Florida Atlantic University, SMU, Southern Methodist University. He as well is an author, a leadership coach. He was the 2001 AP Coach of the Year. That's something that, are you proud of winning that?
Oh, gosh.
We jump in with deep questions to start.
It feels good, but that's a team award. It's was I a better coach in 2001? That was my second year as a head coach. I was a better coach 6 years later, but you don't win an award, and your team, it's a team award. So my team was really good that year. My staff was really good. Am I proud of it? I'm proud of it for those reasons. And it's, a nice tagline. But The thing that I look at, and, it's a blessing and curse, is I look at the trajectory. Like you said, head coach at Notre Dame, the head coach at North Carolina, and you said FAU. We used to have to explain FAU until Dusty May took them to the Final Four a couple years ago. Then SMU, and we used to have to explain that, like SMU. They had Eric Dickerson, and they were really good in football once.
At once.
And so, like when I give a keynote talk, I put up a graph, and this graph is climbing, and it's steep incline, and then it's sharp decline. And I ask people, I said, what is that? What does that look like? What does that represent? And finally, someone says, a market crash. And then the next slide is Matt's coaching career. That's what happened. I went from the head coach, assistant coach at Davidson under Bob McKillop, assistant coach for Roy Williams at Kansas for 7 years. We had great success. First head coaching job was Notre Dame. Had very good success there. They wanted to keep me. They offered me a 10-year contract to stay. I went to my alma mater to coach at North Carolina after Dean Smith and Michael Jordan recruited me to come home after Roy Williams turned it down. First year, we had a great year. My second year, we didn't. My third year, we were rebuilding, and then had a key player get hurt, political landmines I stepped on, and they asked me to leave. And I took a couple years off, and I went on a leadership journey. And Tyler, this is where I get excited.
Yeah.
And because as a coach, as a player, what do you do when you win a game or lose a game? You study the film and you debrief, right? So I debriefed on my coaching career and went on this leadership journey and learned from people, the Carol and Jack Weber at the University of Virginia, Darden School. Worked with her as an executive coach, went to Wharton, took classes there under guys like Mike Useem, Fran Johnston. She helped author the book, Primal Leadership, The Art of Emotional Intelligence, with Dan Goleman. And I remember sitting in that class because how
old were you at this point?
How old? 41.
Give or take. All right. So early 40s, you had great success. And then I'm going to use, these are my terms, not your terms. You get ahead of yourself. You get over your skis. You talked about, you write about in your book, you talk about it, stepping on these landmines, doing things that sabotaged you, even though you didn't realize you were doing it, which I think a lot of people can relate to. And then what I call a mirror shattering moment where all of a sudden, not only does your world, but everything just without a moral failure, it blew up.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, it blew up right in front of my eyes, and it was everybody to see. I mean, we're talking in the University of North Carolina basketball, which, in sports in our country,
Probably one of the two most iconic.
I mean, basketball, it's,
Well,
football.
three, I guess, if you include Kentucky, right? I
Yeah,
mean,
but in all of sports, like what's
yeah,
bigger? Well, maybe the Yankees, the Lakers.
my Buckeyes.
So what
Just laugh.
it's up there. And
It's
so
fine. We can laugh it
it's
off, right?
national news, and media outside the house, and ducking out of the building, and
Yeah.
what happened, and then the public shaming and the press conference after. And that's like, I try to discount it, Tyler. And I remember working with Fran Johnson, an executive coach in Philadelphia, and she said, "No, it's not like a corporate deal. Like, I'm trying to think. This happens in business all the time." She's like, "No, this is different because you trusted these men in this university when you were 17."
Before we get that deep into it, right? And going back to, kind of this moment, you went on a leadership journey. And here's what I recognize reading from your book is we're just talking here is so many people are leading, operating businesses, coaching players, whether you're coaching in a corporate room, a corporate experience, or on a basketball court. And there is so little taught about leadership and how to lead. And it's all, hey, focus on the X's and O's. Can you create a great inbound play? Can you, game plan in order to break a press? Can you do the and I'm just gonna say from my experience and differently, but it's like that stuff doesn't matter as much as all the other things. Is that fair?
Oh, 100%, Tyler, you nailed it. I was a great tactician. I really saw the game as well as
You had you had great teachers too.
I was the coach on the floor, played for Dean Smith, played for Bob McKillop in high school, was the legendary coach at Davidson, worked under Roy Williams. I was the coach on the floor as a player, and as I got older, vision, and I see it in business too. Like, do you have a vision? Can you see? Like, people are looking, but can they see? Right?
Yeah.
And some people can't see. And so then, like, spatial awareness, what fits, what doesn't fit, what's out of order. I could really dissect the game. And I thought that was the most important thing. And a friend
I'm laughing, Matt, because as you say that, I'm thinking back to much my same. I was a nutritionist for dairy cows. And I thought my job was to create the best diets for cows so they were the healthiest, most productive. Much like your own experience, I stepped on some landmines and it brought me to my knees.
Yeah. So a friend of mine, and this is why executive coaching to me is so important, and having peer advisory groups, said there's the art of coaching and the science of coaching.
Okay.
And I've broken it down to the organizational triangle. Every organization has talent, systems, and culture. And the better your system, the better your culture, the better talent you attract, the better your talent will perform, and the better the talent you'll retain. But I've seen organizations, and you probably have too, that have great talent, great systems, but a bad culture, and they're not going to be successful. On the flip side, we have seen decent talent, decent systems, great culture win championships. So I take the triangle and go like this, where culture is king. Culture is more important than talent and systems, because without it, it's going to turn toxic and you won't perform at your best of your ability as a team.
So your experiences, going back from, as you mentioned, as a 17-year-old and being in a system and learning from great coaches, then working with those coaches again, and what pieces of that culture mask other failures? Meaning, for example, how can a culture create such a overwhelming stranglehold that it covers up bad leadership?
I think I would kind of say that if you have great culture, then you have great leadership, but you might not have great strategy.
Okay.
So systems and culture are different. They're married at the hip, but define leadership, right?
Yeah, and maybe let me clarify there, and that's great. Is you played on a national championship team. You saw those, you experienced those, and were part of them. And was leadership always, man, that's the absolute best way to treat people? Maybe not. Sometimes I would come back to your point is, if you're going to achieve that, man, there's got to be really good talent, systems, culture. But yet, I think where I was trying to get at is sometimes you can have such great talent and great systems that culture is, it works for now.
Yeah, well, I think some people can get by and skimp on it, but your talent better be super.
Yeah.
And I think, though, if you don't have great culture, you're not going to execute the systems. There's got to be a culture of accountability to implement a system. I'm thinking football now. I'm thinking Brady.
That's good. Let's go.
Bill
Belichick.
Bill Belichick, who happens to be at my alma mater with, let's not talk about that.
We can talk about my Buckeyes if you want to, Matt, but no,
Sure.
And keep going. And this idea of, and I think where the challenge that I kind of want a perspective from you is, again, hitting very direct is you played for Dean. You went and coached with Roy. You went out and did your own thing. You had a great, plan at Notre Dame, as you said, have success. You go back to North Carolina and all of a sudden the culture's there, but yet the leadership dynamics are different.
I talk about the 6 no's of leadership in the book Rebound. And I made up a dumb acronym because coaches love acronyms. And I broke my rule of you shouldn't have more than 4 keys, right? Because people can't remember more than 3 or 4 things.
Yeah.
So I make it 6, and it's called Stevet. And I make a story up of this 7-footer from Eastern Europe with grades named Stevet, because I Googled Stevet and some name popped up in Eastern Europe. So I made up this story because stories stick, right?
Yeah.
So the 6 no's, KNOWS, you got to know yourself. I think more than anything, a leader has to know themselves. Your biggest strengths, your biggest weakness. You have to know your team. How do they like to be coached? And you can't treat everybody the same. You got to treat everybody fairly. You got to know your environment. That with me at North Carolina, I came in and the political environment was so strong with Dean Smith and Bill Guthridge, the 2 legendary coaches, still in the building with 4 secretaries that I inherited that had been there probably on average 20 years apiece. That environment, I did not manage well. And then the vision, you got to have a vision, because if you don't know where you're going, people don't want to follow you. And then you got to know your industry. I was very strong there, my industry. I knew.
Played in it, been in it.
Yeah, and I
had success coaching. It. Yeah.
I was an X&O junkie. And then here's where I failed too, where I think that the second T is mind for the truth, Tyler. And people don't mind for the truth. I was bad at it because my biggest strength was I'm intense, I'm driven, I'm aggressive, I'm good in quick, tight spaces. End of a game, things slow down for me at the end of a game. But I like to go fast, and so I'd go around and ask questions in a manner where I was going to get the answer I wanted. And so I didn't mine for the truth. And so if you don't manage the truth is going to manage you right out the door.
Let's go into that one. I mean, that's a quote that I saw in your book that I wrote down to the top of my notes. You have to mine for the truth. And here I want to dissect the difference of you mining for the truth as a player compared to a coach.
Well, as a player, I always wanted to know what I needed to improve on.
Okay.
I didn't like to be like, yeah, well, you want to be like, oh, you're good at this, you're good at that. Like, that's great. But tell me where I need to work on, because I don't want to have a weakness as a player. And I was a 6'7", skilled player. I wasn't a good athlete. I had 3 dunks in my college career at 6'8", yeah, I was such a bad athlete that I dunked one time in practice, feeling pretty good about myself, and I go to run down the floor, and my teammates are laughing. Like, that's where it's real, right? That's the truth. Like, okay. That's the truth. Yeah, the truth is, you're not a good athlete, so when you dunk, the teammates chuckle. Well, okay, well, that hurts, but okay, it's the truth.
I mean, yeah.
Yeah, it's the truth. So I want to know, okay, do I need to improve my left hand, my jump shot? And, that I wanted that. And then there's a false sense when you're at a place like North Carolina. I started 3 years at North Carolina on great teams that you're going to play in the NBA. So you have this false sense. And one of the worst days of my life, Tyler, was draft day, June 19th, 1984. And I was picked, and I wrote about it in the book. I was picked in the 6th freaking round. They don't have 6 rounds anymore. Like in football, you get drafted in the 6th round, you might not make the team.
You got a chance.
In basketball, like now they only have 2 rounds. So there's a false sense of security that I would make the NBA, and I didn't. So the truth, like, hey, Matt, you might not get drafted.
The reality.
Yes.
Well, and I think, as you talk about, it's one thing being a player, a performer, and saying, and I think the image that comes to my mind is the classic, you can't handle the truth.
Yeah.
From Jack Nicholson, right? But here's the thing is, can you not handle it, or are you not presenting yourself in a way to be told the truth?
Right. See, when I was coaching, I do believe my personality, and I don't like to be, I'm a junkie for assessments, right? So I'm certified through John Maxwell. We talked about John before the show. I went through John Maxwell's training program, and I'm a DISC certified, instructor, right? So I love DISC, Myers-Briggs, predictive index, all these. I'm a junkie for that stuff. So basically, I'm a high D and I, and I joke, like, don't finish the spelling of it, because I've been called that.
Yeah. Hey,
that name.
I can relate, Matt. I can relate.
But I'm like, don't tell me what to do. Right? How do you get me? Leadership is manipulation with good intent. Good leadership is manipulation with good intent. So how do you get me to do what you want me to do? And so by telling me to do something, that doesn't work. So you got to kind of sell me on it. You got to come through the side door, not through the front door, because I'm competitive, I'm intense.
You're going to fight back.
I'm aggressive.
Yeah.
And so how do you present that to me in a way? And, I wasn't ready. Your life's impacted by 3 things: the people you meet, the books you read, and the trauma in your life, right?
Yeah.
So the first 2 you can control. The third, it's hard to control. But the trauma for me was losing my job. My trauma for me was getting cut by the NBA. And that, I hit rock bottom, and then I rebounded. That's why the title of the book, you rebound, right? And so I probably needed to be, it's like a locomotive on a track. I needed a locomotive coming with equal velocity and force to knock me off the track, to create that trauma. Like, oh damn, I need to learn. I need to grow as a leader.
One thing that's again relating to in this kind of idea, you have to mine for the truth. And again, as a player, it's one thing. So as an individual performer on a team, it's one thing to get that feedback. You get into a leadership role and it's altogether different. And one of the things as you're sharing this, as I either as I'm preparing and thinking about it and reading from your book, and it's like, man, all the things that make us a great player, a 3-year starter at North Carolina, the ability to compete and fight, to play with Jordan, to do all those things with all the rest of the notable guys there, that'll kill you as a coach.
That's right. Do you see, this is, I love thank you. Like, just first of all, thank you for having me on your show and the questions you ask, and you're prepared, but yet I can tell you pivot, and like something hits you and you dive. I love the questions you're asking. I collect quotes, and I'm coming out with a journal called the Timeout Journal because I'm a big believer in journaling. I use John Maxwell's quotes all the time. Like you grow at the end of your comfort zone, right? So what hit me? Someone said a couple of months ago, don't confuse competence with good leadership.
Oh, that's good.
Right?
That's great.
Just because you're like, and look at the coaches, like go back to Bill Belichick. Bill Belichick didn't played what, Division III football? Like Wesleyan?
Yeah. You want to talk about great coaches that played Division III football? I mean, there's a litany of them, just as much as there's probably just as many great basketball coaches.
Right. Like Dean Smith hardly played at Kansas. Roy Williams played on the JV team at North Carolina. They were not good players. Tom Izzo played, I think, at Division II. So I was a starter on a national championship team. I was good technically, but you look at I worked for Larry Bird at the Pacers, and he coached for 3 years. And I remember asking him one time, I said, why did you stop coach of the year? They went to the Eastern Conference Finals, NBA Finals. He's Larry, sometimes a man of few words. I said, why did you stop coaching? He said, I didn't like it. Ooh. Jerry West, he was offered to be like a co-head coach with Pat Riley. And he said, no, I don't want the job because I'm too impatient. And so that goes back to the Stevitt model, know yourself, right? And so great players generally are not great coaches. But
man, we have a love affair with them.
We do.
I mean, we do. Our society, and I mean, we could talk about, coaches from youth all the way to professional to whatever else. It's like we have this love affair and think, oh, they should be a great coach. And yet, much like I would say that you had to work through, it becomes a dumpster fire when you use the same things that got you over the hump as a player to, as you said, manipulate with good intent others, to lead others, to bring them to something greater. You can't have the I'm going to get in your face and force you as you can on a field, on a court. Like,
right.
It's different.
It is, and I learned the hard way. So the trauma. So I'm going to pivot here.
Yeah, please.
A basketball term. I said your life's impacted by 3 things: the people you meet, the books you read, the trauma in your life. You've had another guest, John Gordon, who is a friend of mine and kind of a mentor. I challenge my clients, my executive coaching clients, to inflict trauma on themselves. How can you do that?
Yeah.
A 360.
100%. Changed my life.
A great exercise is stop, start, continue. Right? How can they get truthful feedback? And that's why I love what I do, because I am my purpose in life, I think, is to teach and coach. And now it's not basketball players, it is executives, and getting to drill down and hold them accountable and challenge them, because as you were touching on earlier, no one's doing that, right? No, people are afraid to challenge the CEO. So the CEO, to mine for the truth, has to create and trick almost the team to tell them the truth, like set them up to tell the truth. And what do I mean by that? Like, I was going to work hard. I'm a hard worker, right? So I work hard and I'm busy. So I'm going around. Tyler, how's your the contact with the academic advisor? How's the team doing? Good. Everyone's good, right? And I'm nodding my head. Also, by the way, I'm 6'7", and like, I didn't realize how impactful that was, because 50% of communication is body language and 35%
it's
is
more. Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
And so I'm standing over my assistant in his office and I'm saying, we're going to be fine academically, right? Everyone's going to be eligible next semester. Oh yeah, coach. Yeah. And I go to the next guy and I said, scheduling's all set, right? Third guy, camp's all set, right? And then I'm like, yeah, I'm running things. Check. And what happens is they go to lunch or go for a walk and they're like, man, coach came by and he asked about the guys academically and they're not doing so good, but I couldn't tell them.
Yeah.
Right. And then the crap hits the fan and you're
so let me ask this. When were you able to find that out?
I found it out, I think, and that's why I wanted to coach again. When I went through the leadership journey and studied, my life was pretty good. I was doing TV. I was kind of America's guest, former head coach at North Carolina. I was doing some real estate, My wife says she learned about me accepting the FAU job on the radio. Now, I don't agree with that. I deny that happened.
Yeah.
But I wanted to coach again because I wanted to put these lessons to work to see, is leadership truly a learned behavior? And did I get better? And I think it really hit me when I got to SMU, where I got better. And I got to leverage core values and lead through core values. And I became more emotionally intelligent.
You talk about the trauma, the moment, the rebuilding, the leadership journey. If you had to say, because I know what it was for me, I know I've talked to others, what was it for you that allowed you to be different as a coach?
Well, I think the trauma, being humbled. Your biggest strength's your biggest weakness. And I'm a tough guy from Long Island. Like if you get challenged in the park and you kind of bow up on somebody, like, you don't want to be accused of being a punk, right?
Yeah.
And so now I got smacked down. I'm like, maybe that's not the best way, and we touched on doing the 360. I had 360s done upon my exit from North Carolina. So now, they're anonymous in the first place. Two, I'm out. So, and I'm like reading this stuff in black and white. I'm like, oh, damn. Ouch. Ooh. Oh, damn, gut punch. And that is the trauma I'm talking about, that CEOs, before they get kicked to the curb, create that trauma by inviting people to tell them the truth through 360 surveys, really, skip level meetings and getting feedback, because most people are going to be afraid to tell you the truth, and you got to create a safe zone for your team. So I said this, if I got to be a head coach again, I would have a coach and their title would be, Tyler is the truth teller. And here's your business card. All right, here's your business card. On it says Tyler, truth teller. And that's a pass that whenever you want, you can come to me and tell me the truth. Like, hey, coach, You're a real jerk in that meeting, and you got on Tommy, and he didn't deserve that, and you should apologize. Now, I don't have to agree, but I've got to accept it. I've got to take it. I've got to thank you. Tyler, thank you for telling me that.
How did that evolve for you at your, the post Carolina coaching jobs?
I think that I got to ask questions more. I was better at asking questions of my staff, and learned to ask the youngest assistant first. And by the way, I was not perfect. Like I don't want to come off as, oh, I had my stuff together. No, I did not handle my staff perfectly. But what I did, I thought was good, was set boundaries. Like, hey, and Colin Powell has a great quote about this. What is loyalty? Well, loyalty is that you are supposed to challenge me as the head coach in a meeting. But once I decide on the direction, when we go out that door, we're aligned.
Correct.
Right? That's loyalty. And so, creating that where I get the feedback, I get conflict. Like, I enjoy the argument. I enjoy the debate. And then, okay, I'm going to decide because I'm the head coach. And when you're a head coach, you can decide, but I get to decide.
Because someone has to.
Someone has to. And sometimes I've told my assistants, one guy was trying to sell me we should press more. Another guy said we should run the UCLA offense. And I said, yeah, that's all good stuff. But I can't sell that to the team. I can't. And if they come to me and ask me a question about the offense and I don't know, like I go back to the Stevitt model, you got to be the industry expert, and I don't know, there's a crack. There's a crack that they'll look at, and they'll lose confidence. So I've got to be able to know it inside out so I can sell it to the team. Said, listen, if you believe in it that much, put together a proposal and let's discuss it in the off season.
Well, or I think as I'm thinking, and as I'm thinking of a friend of mine who was a head coach, he was an assistant coach at University of Missouri football. And he talked about changing their offense and essentially having to sell the head coach on that. And one of the things that I know can happen in so many organizations is, and I'm just wondering if this would be the case, is I don't necessarily have to believe in it, but I believe in you so much that the belief in you is like, why are we doing this? Because Coach Christensen said we should do it. There's no questions asked. We are doing it, right? And I think that's the part of leadership opportunity that I wonder, were you always willing to do that early on before the moment where, like, man, it has to be from me because I have to prove myself, as opposed to, and I'm just making this up a year today, and you're like, why are we going to press? Because they said we should press, and I believe them. That's all that matters.
That's maturity. As a young coach, you are just fired up, and you've got to show the world that you're in charge. And when my last 2 years at SMU, I hired a guy, Larry Mangino, who's now at Liberty. And I wanted to run the Princeton offense. And Larry really knew the Princeton offense because he learned it from Joe Scott at Air Force, and they had a lot of success. I'm thinking they can win at Air Force, we can win at SMU. So I hired him. And now I needed to understand it, the why, but he taught it. So I called him my offensive coordinator, like in football. And when he taught the offense, I did something I never did before. I sat down during practice. So I deferred to him. The players called him Larry Mangenius, right? And that could have been like, oh gosh, they're not calling me that. They really, as a leader, I teach this now more than ever. If you ever seen the Eisenhower time matrix, where there are 4 quadrants, and this is how President Eisenhower made decisions. Quadrant 1 is things that are urgent and important. Quadrant 2, they are important but not urgent. Quadrant 3, urgent, not important. Quadrant 4, not important, not urgent. And a lot of people, including myself, when I was early in my coaching career, I operated at a quadrant 1. What does that do? That leads to burnout.
Yep.
Everyone's, overcharged. So the more I operated at a quadrant 2, the less you have to operate at a quadrant 1. Leaders should live in quadrant 2. What is quadrant 2? It's time to develop relationships, which leads to good culture. It's time to plan and strategize. So you put in SOPs, right? So that way when stuff happens, you got a plan and you can just sit back and say, Tyler, you handle it. You got this. We talked about this, right? And so part of me is goes back to, and it's funny we're talking about this because it just hit me. This is what I love about being an executive coach. I get to learn. I get to learn from the John Maxwell's of the world, the John Gordons of the world. I get to learn from the great speakers we have come in, talk to my groups. I get to learn from my employees. I'm reading, I'm listening to books. And so I feel like people feel like it's a badge of honor to say, man, I worked my ass off and I was up at 6 and I stayed in the office till 8 and I only got 4 hours of sleep. And I used to think, wow, that's impressive. I don't know if I could do that, but man, I guess that's how you get successful. Now I'm like, what an idiot.
No, talk more about that. What precedent does that set?
It set a precedent that that everybody, the leader has to model the behavior they want in the organization, right? And you're obviously a football guy, right? So
sports, it's all right. Yeah.
The coach, I remember the coach at Oklahoma, Stoops. I think he was always home for dinner with his family. And there was a Wednesday when he brought the kids to the coaches brought their kids to the practice. Oh boy, that was against anything I believed in as a coach, right? Everything is work, 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 work. But at some point, first of all, not everyone's wired the same. 2, that hit me too. When I met with the executive coach, she said, you're an ENTJ, and that's a Myers-Briggs category. And I joked and said to myself, I've been called a lot of 4-letter words, but never an ENTJ. And then she, this is like 2 months after I lost my job and I'm kind of depressed. And she said, well, only 2% of the population are ENTJs. And I go, damn, Carolina just got rid of an elite coach, 2%. That's what I'm thinking, right? And she shakes her head and she goes, I didn't say a word. She said, body language, right? She said, oh, you don't get it. I said, get what? She said, that means 98% of the population don't think like you think. That was the start of my journey to emotional intelligence.
So I'm going to share this for you. And I just kind of, again, to this point, I had to learn how to get lazy.
Yeah.
And so and I knew,
Go ahead, keep talking.
Whenever I share that and the people get it, they get it. Like, you just got it. So when you just got it, what did that mean to you?
We have this image, and I've worked for coaches that, were hard workers and, is glorified in the world of college basketball.
I mean, there's a lot of generational, I would say I'm 45, you're, in your 60s. There's a lot of guys your age that are leading organizations that are saying, if your butt is not in the seat at 5 o'clock, then you didn't do a day's worth of work. And you're just like, dude, you don't get it. I was done with what you gave me 6 hours ago. I've been sitting here twiddling my thumbs. I could do 17 other things for this organization, but you're too busy worrying about how much my butt is sitting in the seat to actually help me grow as a leader.
That's right. What it looks like, right? What it looks like. And they're control freaks, which I was, to a point of, you're not in the seat, you mustn't be working, right? So I was listening to a book the other day. They're talking about if you don't trust other people, you probably don't trust yourself.
Ooh.
Right?
That's great.
So where you been? How come you're not here? And like, so the point, you
So
point,
going back, when I said you had to learn how to be lazy,
learn how to be. I love that, and I'm probably going to steal that.
use it.
And
Take it.
my rule, by the way, is if I steal a quote after the third time I say it out loud, then I can take credit for it. Okay.
You know, I learned this from Maxwell, as you have too. Take it and make it better.
Okay.
Just that's it.
So today I'm having a one-to-one session, coaching session with a client, and we were talking about, like perfection and doing things and focusing on, you won the game, but you only won by 20. You could have won by 30, right? And then taking that home, and then being uptight, and everyone else is uptight around you. And I said to him, when people say, "Oh, I couldn't care less," I said to him, "You need to care less." And that's to your point. You need to work, be lazy, be more lazy. Learn to be lazy.
And again, for me, growing up on a farm where, I mean, it's work and my dad was a college athlete. It was just that idea and the trauma of, things that I had to go through, the force of I will be intense and push myself through. And what I found, and I think you're going to relate to this, is I was a bulldozer that left carnage.
Yeah.
And in order for me and how I related to it, and again, I love this and I enjoy this time because again, the relatability. And it's like, yeah, I had to slow down to be with people around me. And then what I learned is, now we can go fast. Instead of thinking I'm going to go so fast that they want to keep up with me, that doesn't work.
Oh, this is awesome. Tyler, I thank you for having me on the show. I love this stuff. I get geeked out on leadership. And so there's a pride, like the competitiveness of I have more capacity than you do for work. So I'm going to outwork you. And so that's a flex, right? Like you can't keep up with me. Like, who do you think you are? Right. So that's one aspect of it. Like lay off of that. Right.
Yeah. It doesn't work.
It doesn't work. Two, I use the analogy of driving a speedboat. I'm going 70 miles an hour and I look back and people are flying out of the boat and they're in the wake drowning. And instead of slowing down and circling back, I'm like, should have held on tighter. That's the carnage you were talking about.
Absolutely.
So instead of going slower and teaching them how to hold on and putting life jackets on, I'm going fast because it feels good, it feels right. It was glorified growing up.
I realized this a couple years ago that youth coaches, I was coaching high school level kids, coaching soccer. I realized I was teaching them what to expect of their next boss. And it was that set in and realizing that we have so many coaches that it doesn't matter what sport it is. They like you at North Carolina where think, man, Dean is going to love the X's and O's I put together. He's going to watch that film and like, man, look what all those guys did. Wow. Because he was that guy, right? Instead of sitting there and say, well, I don't know about your play call, but man, your guys played with heart. They played for each other. Your plays were suspect, but wow, your team performed. Like that wasn't something that you were probably, and I'm just speculating here, that wasn't something you were going after. And that's where I think so many coaches today, it doesn't matter what level they're in, they're aiming for I want someone on SportsCenter or whatever else to critique my plays instead of looking at saying, the team's okay, their system's okay, but man, they get the absolute most out of their talent and they're an organization that is all in for each other. Yes,
to all of it, to all of what you just said. I think because coaches, are you a servant leader?
Well, it goes back to being a player. Like, you have this a little bit at North Carolina and sometimes they don't, but you get credit for doing all the things that don't show up on the scoreboard, All right. So that's teaching great, coaching. Like you talk about Roy, who, is on the JV team. He's just a great player in the program. He's not a scorer that we're relying on to win the championship. He's just a dude that's coming in and making this program fun for everyone, right? Those end up being great coaches.
Yes. The servant leader, the Ted Lassos of the world, right? Uh, I heard Phil Jackson on a podcast, and I'm actually hoping to get him on my podcast. And he talks, and this is kind of where we're going. And this is what I encourage in my clients, my executive coaching clients, is to be the transformational leader, not the transactional leader. Right? And so Phil Jackson was that transformational coach. Like he gave players books at Christmas, not just everyone got the same book. He got individual book. Oh, Tyler, I thought this would be good for you. Dennis, I'm going to give you this book. I thought you would resonate with this. And when you saw him in late game situations, first of all, he ran the triangle offense, which was a structure that gave the players freedom to make choices on the court. And then in the game got tight at the end, and maybe they were losing a lead. He didn't call timeout. He wanted the players to figure it out. Like that is powerful. He's trusting the players. And so, I heard this the other day. Trust isn't earned. You got to give it away to get it, right? You give trust, then you get it. And where I felt Pat Riley, who was a great coach, was more of a transactional coach. Like, here's the plays, you run them, boom, boom, boom. Yeah. And the transformational. So as a leader, I feel like a leader is empowered with three things: cast the vision, drive the culture, engage in large business transactions. And to do that, you need some white space on your calendar. To do that, you need to hire good people and delegate. And that way you're operating at a quadrant 2 of the Eisenhower matrix.
Well, and I think the challenge we're in today in so many places is, individuals that were coached on the quadrant 1. They had people that were commanded. Everything's urgent. Everything's important. It is hair on fire. And I really wonder, as I'm speculating on this, and I don't want to dig too deep, and maybe we're just going to have to talk about this later, is the last 5 years with COVID, with the political turmoil, with all of our societal change, has forced leaders into operating more in quadrant 1 than they've been allowing themselves to get into quadrant 2.
My guess, and I think we can only guess, maybe this would be a good case study, is that the answer is I think twofold. One, yes, right? Because the culture has suffered, and I don't care what people said early. You can't drive a culture through a Zoom call, right? Or a text message. We talked about communication is 50% body language. We have some body language here, but I don't know if your foot's tapping or not, right? I don't know if you're sweating or not. I don't know if the veins are bulging on your neck. Then the tone, we get the tone, the content, but the communication is that you need to drive the culture through spending time with people. And I'm glad to see, people expect, hey, you got to come back 3 days. My daughter works at Ralph Lauren. The expectation is in the office 3 days. That's big. And I think the other thing is leadership is not taught. Oh. Like leadership, who takes a leadership class? Well, maybe if you're lucky, you took one in college. If you're lucky, but this hit me too a couple of years ago. I always joke that, the dentist, they have a dental practice, a medical practice, a legal practice. And I'm like, dude, go practice on somebody else. And when you get good enough, then work on me. Like, you got it out. It's like when a player says, my bad, Like, no. Take accountability. So when are you going to get good enough to call it like a company? And I'm saying, oh my gosh, leadership is a practice. I run a coaching practice because it's changing, it's evolving, generations change,
Yep.
technology changes, just
All of
like in law, just like in medicine, technology changes, meds change. And so they are practicing their skills. Leadership is a skill that needs to be practiced. And I use the comp to golf. The Masters, first Thursday, they play their 18. What do? They go to the range with their swing coach to tweak their swings. These are the best golfers in the world. Football, you talk about football. The ratio of practice to games is 5-1.
Mm-hmm.
5-1. You train 5 days to perform 1 day. In business, the ratio is like freaking 1 to 229. Right, 219. Let's say there's 220 business days a year. They don't practice. I feel like Allen Iverson. We're talking about practice. You gotta practice. And so getting your team into quadrant 2 to train them, and not just, I do workshops. I love the workshops over a course of 3 to 12 months, because now you see progress. Like, I'll go and do a workshop. I did a workshop last week. It's just going to be a single. And they came up, this is so cool. They came up to me and said, well, what's next, coach? What's next? I'm like, talk to HR and bring me back.
Yeah,
We
exactly.
got to train. The Navy SEALs say you don't rise to the occasion, you fall to the level of your training.
Yep.
So when people say our sales are down, our sales stink, say, are you practicing your calls? Are you practicing your presentations? Or are you just winging it?
And sometimes practice in the field is actually going and doing it and then evaluating, say, where'd it go wrong? It's one thing to do it internally. It's like, sometimes there is a point. It's like, yeah, we need to go scrimmage against someone else. So that way we challenge ourselves in different ways. As we're getting close to the top of the hour here, and I have a flight to catch. I didn't tell you about that, but I'm telling you now. I would love, this is the final question, where can people learn more about you, about what you offer, all of those great things?
Thank you. They can do two things. Go to my website, dohertycoaching.com. That's DOHERTY coaching.com. Or just email me at matt@dohertycoaching.com.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. Thank you for being such a wonderful guest. For all of you watching on YouTube, make sure you hit the subscribe button as well as the bell to get notified whenever we drop new content. If you're listening, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever else, if you could do this, if you could rate and review this episode, that'll help more people find great individuals, inspirational individuals, impactful individuals like Matt.
And if anybody rates it below a 5, I'm coming after them.
All 6-7 of you. Matt, thanks so much for being here. Until next time, choose to lead with impact.